والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد سيد المرسلين وخاتم النبيين وعلى آله وأصحابه الطيبين الطاهرين ومن اتبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم لا سهل إلا ما جعلته سهلا وأنت يا حي يا قيوم تجعل الحزن إذا شئت سهلا. اللهم ذكرنا ما نسينا وعلمنا ما جهلنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما. اللهم إنا نعوذ بك من حال أهل النار لله تعالى. I praise Allah, I glorify Him, and I thank Him for all the blessings that He gives without Him being obligated. And I ask Allah to raise the rank of our beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam and to protect his Muslim nation. I testify no one deserves to be worshipped except Allah, the one without a partner, the one without an equal, the one without a similar, the one who is unlike anything in the universe, and nothing in the universe is like Him. He has no father, no mother, no sister, no brother, no son, and no daughter. He exists without time and place because He is the creator of time and place. He does not reside above the throne, and He is not attributed with fatigue, like the Jews say. Our Lord is glorified beyond any imperfection that the non-Muslims attribute to Him. Whatever you imagine in your mind, Allah Ta'ala does not resemble that. And whoever attributes an attribute of the creations to Allah is outside of Islam. And I testify that Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, the son of Abdullah, the son of Abdul Muttalib, the son of Hashim, the son of Abdul Manaf, from the tribe of Quraysh, is the best creation of Allah and His final prophet and messenger, sent to all humans and jinn, and He is truthful about everything He conveyed of the revelation. Thereafter, remind ourselves to have the sincere intention for the sake of Allah in attending this session of Islamic knowledge, because having the sincere intention is a requirement to get the reward. So the Muslim, whenever he does a good deed, he has to have the sincere intention for the sake of Allah to get reward for that good deed. The reward is defined as the compensation that the Muslim receives in the hereafter for the good deeds that he did in this life among what makes him happy. An example of the reward that is guaranteed to the righteous Muslim in the grave is that his grave is expanded approximately 105 feet by 105 feet, and his grave is illuminated with a light similar to the light of the full moon, and the fragrance of paradise would be present in the grave. The sincere intention means for the Muslim to do the good deed, seeking the acceptance of Allah only, and not the praise of the people. So alhamdulillah, we are grateful to Allah that we have been guided to Islam, because Islam is the only true religion, it is the only valid religion, it is the only religion accepted by Allah, the creator of the universe. And we are grateful and thankful to Allah that we have been given access to the knowledge of Abū Shujā wal Jamā'ah with the connected authentic chains. Because the knowledge of Abū Shujā wal Jamā'ah is the key to paradise. The knowledge of Abū Shujā wal Jamā'ah is the life of Islam. So continuing on with the explanation of the Matan of Abū Shujā, which is a beginner's book in the Shafi'i school of law. It is widely known, internationally known. Any student of knowledge who dedicates himself to the path of acquiring and serving the knowledge of Islam, if he is studying the Islamic law in the Shafi'i school, this is one of the very first books that they will learn. So we reached to page 186. We did talk about page 187, but today we're going to continue from page 186. We're talking about the what is necessary for the validity of following the Imam. What is the conditions for the validity of following the Imam? The conditions for the validity of being the Imam in certain scenarios. And so here we reach to among the conditions for the following to be valid is for a person who recites Al-Fatiha properly to follow a person that recites Al-Fatiha properly. So in order for that following to be valid, the person that you're following, they have to recite Al-Fatiha properly. And so this is a big thing. Imagine someone in a place, there's 300 people behind him, he's supposedly the Imam, and he's reciting Surah Al-Fatiha in a way that is invalid, and in a way that according to the Islamic law, the recitation is not valid. So the author said, moreover, it is not permissible for a person who recites Al-Fatiha properly to pray behind a person who does not recite Al-Fatiha properly. So here we have footnote 264. It is not valid for one who reads Al-Fatiha correctly to be led by someone who does not. Meaning, if the follower knows that the Imam does not pronounce the Fatiha correctly, and despite that he followed him in prayer, his prayer would be invalid. If the Imam is truly unable to recite the verbal integrals other than the Fatiha because of a letter that he is unable to pronounce correctly, this does not affect the validity of the follower's prayer who can recite correctly. So the detail here is for other than Al-Fatiha among the verbal integrals. That's a detail. So if the Imam is truly unable to recite the verbal integrals other than the Fatiha, and I guess we can do a pop-up question. First, the first level is how many verbal integrals are there? And obviously, sheikhs are exempted from this question, so no sheikhs raise their hand. But for people that are not sheikhs, if you know the answer, this is an easy one. How many verbal integrals are in the prayer? Verbal. Al-Arkan al-Qawliya. I'll even let's do the question in Arabic. كم من الأركان القولية ما عدد الأركان القولية في الصلاة؟ يعني الأركان التي هي فقط باللسان. And that's giving a hint, obviously. Verbal integrals means the integrals that are said only with the tongue. 17 هذا في جملة الأركان، يعني جملة تصل الأركان إلى 17 ركنا. لكن أريد كم هي الأركان القولية؟ يعني من هذه 17 هناك عدد منها تكون قولية أو عدد منها يكون قولية. So does anybody know? You can type it in the chat if you know. It's an easy one. How many are the verbal integrals? How many verbal integrals are there in the prayer? Somebody has to know. Should I call on someone who I think knows the answer? Or I would hope knows the answer? Well, I don't want to put anybody on the spot, but it's 5. Now, if whoever had answered 5, the next question would have been, what are they? But if we don't know the number, yeah. I mean, I would say for precision, no, it's the second one, because that's the integral. Okay, there's 2 more. Yes, but okay, for precision, as-salatu ala nabi. That's, yeah, and then the closing salam. That's correct. So the 5 verbal integrals are the opening takbir, and he's saying Allahu Akbar to start the prayer. Al-Fatiha, the last tashahhud, it's usually referred to as the last tashahhud. As-salatu ala nabi, number 4, and saying Assalamu alaikum, and also known as the closing salam. So if someone had answered that, then the next question would be, what is the actual integral of as-salatu ala nabi? Give an example of that. That's all metin, by the way. Metin mukhtasar. So what would you say as a minimum to fulfill that integral? يصح جوابا لكن اوكي يعني قال اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد. لفظ سيدنا ليس يعني في صورة أقل ما يجزئ، هذا زيادة، لكن صحيح اللهم صل على محمد هذا هو يكون قد أدى هذا الركن. So the minimum is to say Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. So here the author is saying that if the Imam doesn't know that for some reason, for speech impediment, he can't pronounce one of the letters of the last tashahhud, this does not affect the validity of the follower's prayer who can recite properly. And it's not like Al-Fatiha. But yeah, it's very important for the Muslim to take the precautions needed to make sure that his prayer is valid. So that means you don't just follow behind anyone, you do some sort of due diligence, at least for the loudly recited prayers. For the silent prayers, yeah, if you see someone praying, you can pray behind them immediately, because anyways you're going to be reciting. But for the loud prayers, you have to make sure that they recite Al-Fatiha properly and before following them. The author said, if someone cannot recite Al-Fatiha in the proper way, whether due to laziness or because of an illness in one's tongue or other than that, so he is unable to pronounce, for example, the letters Sin, Sad, or Ra in the proper way, in this case, it is not permissible for the one who recites properly to take this person as an Imam. The prayer would not be valid. If the person is not able to pronounce a letter among the letters of the Fatiha properly, then he does not recite from the Fatiha the part that contains that letter. Rather, he replaces it as mentioned in the previous section about the integrals of the prayer. one is not allowed to commit mistakes intentionally. So for the person that actually cannot recite one of the letters of Al-Fatiha, and for that part of Al-Fatiha, he replaces it with something that's valid to replace it with. And the order was mentioned in the previous chapter. If he knows, and he can say another part of the Fatiha, he can say another part of the Quran. If he doesn't know that, then he can say a dhikr that is equivalent to the minimum amount of letters, so it at least has that amount of letters. They follow that order. If the follower follows the Imam and they are both in one masjid, it is valid regardless of the distance between them, as long as the follower knows the movements of the Imam and he does not go ahead of his Imam. So now we're moving on to a different case, and we're talking about now the distance, the physical distance between the Imam and the one who's following the Imam. So there's certain rules of validity that are related to how far away they are from each other. So he says, when the follower is following the Imam, there are different cases. Either both of them, the Imam and the follower, are inside the mosque, or one is inside the mosque and the other is outside of it, or they are both outside the mosque. When they are both inside the mosque, it does not affect the validity of the prayer if the distance between the Imam and the follower is very big. So first scenario, they're both inside of a masjid. And we discussed this before. We said a masjid, Islamically, is referring to a specific place that was dedicated in the Islamic way. It was mentioned with a certain statement that now this building, let's say, or this property, it now has the judgment of a masjid, and it's no longer the private property of any certain individual, and it now belongs to the Muslim nation, and the judgments that apply to the masjid now apply to that area, and that will never change until Judgment Day. So if they're both inside of that type of structure, then there is no limit to the distance that the follower can be away from the Imam. The only restriction is, or the only condition is, as long as the follower can know the movements of the Imam. So he can know that now the Imam is bowing, now the Imam is rising, now the Imam is prostrating, now the Imam is sitting. He can perceive that and he can follow that. Then in that case, the following of that Imam would be valid. He said, as long as the Imam and the follower are both in the mosque, they are considered together. So if the Imam is in the mihrab praying and a person enters the mosque and chooses to stand inside the mosque but at the door, and there are no lines in between them, and he makes the intention of following the Imam in the prayer, the long distance does not invalidate the congregational prayer, even if it were 1,000 yards or more, with the condition that the follower knows about the movements of the Imam. This means he has to know when the Imam bows for ruku', when he straightens up, when he goes down to sujood, etc. This happens by seeing the Imam, or seeing someone who sees the Imam, or hearing the voice of the Imam, or hearing what the conveyor says about the Imam, whether the conveyor is praying or not. There might be a person standing there who is not praying, and he tells the people who are away from the Imam about what the Imam is doing. So in this case, the prayer of the follower is valid because he knows about the movements of the Imam. So as long as that condition is fulfilled, the follower knows the movements of the Imam, there is no limit to the distance that he can be away from the Imam, and that's in the case when they're both inside the masjid. That's not like the musalla. That's not like your local Islamic center. That's not a masjid, it's a musalla. It doesn't have the judgment of a masjid unless it went through that specific Islamic process of converting that property, dedicating that property into being a masjid, and it goes through the proper Islamic process. then that would be now a masjid. Now you might call something that doesn't have that technical definition a masjid from the aspect that it's a place made to pray. Not necessarily that it carries the same technical definition as the place that was dedicated as a masjid. Meaning what? Meaning if the woman has her period, she can go in to that Islamic center that's called a masjid, but it's not technically a masjid. She can go in there, she can sit in there, she can study in there, etc. She can say dhikr in there, but if it was a technical masjid, then she would not be allowed. Likewise, the man who is junub, who has had, let's say, sexual intercourse and has not taken the obligatory ghusl, if it were a technical masjid, he wouldn't be allowed to go inside and sit in there or dwell in there, etc. He would have to take a shower first. But since it's not a technical masjid, then that's the judgment. So keep in mind for that detail when we say if they're both inside of the masjid, that there's no limit to the distance. That applies to the technical masjid. If the imam prays inside the mosque and the follower is praying outside the mosque, close to the imam, without there being a barrier between him and the imam, his prayer is valid as long as he knows about the movements of the imam. This means if the imam is praying inside the mosque and the follower is outside the mosque, then there is a condition that the distance between the follower and the mosque is not more than 300 cubits, even if the distance between the follower and the imam was more. In this case, what counts is the distance between the follower and the mosque. This is if there are no other followers outside the mosque. However, if there were lines of followers from the door of the mosque to the follower, that is, there is one line after another for 10 miles or 100 miles, the prayer would be valid because the lines of followers are not separated. If the distance between two lines is more than 300 cubits, then the prayer of the ones in the back would not be valid. Once there is a separation of two lines for more than 300 cubits, then those who are in the back, whose line is further than 300 cubits away, their prayer would not be valid. So this second scenario, the imam is actually inside the mosque, but the follower is outside. So it's a technical masjid. The imam is inside, the follower is outside. So what happens here? In this case, we don't consider the distance between the imam and the end of the masjid. We consider the distance from where the masjid ends to where the follower is standing outside. So if that distance is more than 300 cubits, then his following of that imam would not be valid. And then he goes into the detail about the lines. So as long as the lines are not separated by more than 300 cubits, they all connect each other. So no matter how far the last line is away from the first line, it would not affect the validity of the prayer. And inshallah, next week we'll continue with more details. If there are no questions, we'll conclude. We're going to pray Isha, and then we will start the special program. طيب نهلل لا إله إلا الله الله